Gon' vote. Everybody gon' vote. Everybody gon' vote. Everybody gon' vote. Comrade! Labor right, them a go down, bong. Them a go down, bong. Them a go down. Is that? Margie, him a God picking. No hope their work if you touch Margie. Margie, him a God picking. No hope their work if you touch Margie. We now vote for Labour. Orange we a come out in now. If you love the PNP, who no step out for Marky G. Jamaica just come along with we. People time come, people time come, people time is up.
Only thing that's on my mind is who's gonna run this town tonight.
Yeah, I say that we are. Pledge your allegiance.
Who's gonna run this town tonight?
Yeah, I say that we are.
We gonna run this town.
Make the trumpets play. Make the trumpets play.
In the first video I did on the Portmore case, I said I thought the opposition needed to stop the protesting, come out of the street with the placard them, and go court. So I have to acknowledge that they did that. For background here, the government passed an act called the Counties and Parishes Amendment Act 2025, and that act is supposed to make Portmore Jamaica's 15th parish. The opposition PNP took issue with this. They said the government was going ahead without proper consultation. They also said there was gerrymandering going around, meaning they were alleging that the government was trying to move around divisions and communities based on whether they supported the JLP or PNP to try to give the JLP an advantage at the polls. So the House of Representatives passed a bill on February 11, 2025, and it was passed in the Senate on February 28, 2025. Now, news came after the passage in the House of Representatives that the Electoral Commission of Jamaica had raised concern, had written to the Parliament and raised concerns about the bill, saying that the Portmore parish boundaries could negatively affect the boundaries of a constituency. Now, that's because the Constitution says the boundary of a constituency shall not cross the boundary of a parish. In other words, constituency A has to be entirely within a parish. You can't have a constituency where half of it in a Westmoreland and half of it in a Hanover. So constituency boundaries are changed by Parliament, and there's a process for that. So the PNP went to court to ask for an interim injunction to stop the government from bringing the law into effect. That's the law that would make Portmore a parish. The opposition said making Portmore a parish would cause the boundaries of a constituency to cross the boundaries of a parish. We just spoke about that. They said it would repeal the charter that made Portmore a municipality, that it would abolish the municipality of Portmore and abolish the office of the mayor of Portmore. Now, the whole idea of asking for an interim injunction is when something going on and you're trying to maintain the status quo, meaning you want to stop things from changing. You want to keep things the same while a dispute is being decided, while a court case is pending. So in this case, the PNP was saying they needed the court to grant this interim injunction to prevent the government from bringing the act into effect and making Portmore a parish, while they, the PNP, were challenging that act in court. And you go for an interim injunction in a particular case because if you wait for the court case itself to be heard, that's going to decide the dispute. Whatever it is you are going to court to stop, that would probably already have gone ahead, and then even if you win in court, you would lose. So in this case, the PNP was saying they were concerned that the government would go ahead and make Portmore a parish, have those changes in the constituencies, and then go ahead and have a general election based on the changed constituency boundaries, and that they, the PNP, would be at a disadvantage and the JLP at an advantage because of those changes. So these are the people who brought the case to court, right? They're all PNP officials of one sort or another. Van Rick Preddy is a PNP councillor for Hellshaw. Hellshaw is in the Portmore municipality, but Councillor Preddy says that Hellshaw would be removed from St. Catherine South and put into the parish of Portmore. Claude Hamilton is a PNP councillor for Portmore Pines. He is saying if the act comes into effect, the division of Portmore Pines would no longer exist. Fitzjackson is the MP for St. Catherine South. That's one of the constituencies that would be affected. Leon Thomas is a directly elected mayor of Portmore. He's also with the PNP. So the PNP, as I said, asked the court for this interim injunction to stop the government from setting a date for the Portmore Act to come into effect. Chief Justice Brian Sykes granted the interim injunction, but when both sides went back to court, both of them came out saying, "We won! We claim victory." So as you can imagine, that was super confusing for a lot of people. So here's the thing though. The interim injunction to prevent the government from bringing the Portmore Act into effect was supposed to remain in force until both sides, government and opposition, went back to court on March 28th. Interim injunction means just that. It's a hold the line provision. It's a court saying, you can't change anything right now. The interim injunction was granted on March 20, 2025, and it was to remain in effect until March 28, when, as I said, the court would hear from both sides again and see what kind of court orders were necessary at that point. It was after the interim injunction was granted on March 20. So on March 26, an affidavit was filed from the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Local Government saying the minister was giving an undertaking not to bring the act into effect until the boundary issue had been dealt with and proper process has been followed. Now, that was exactly the point of the interim injunction. Once the ministry had given that undertaking, you would no longer need an interim injunction. The government has been saying the court case by the PNP is unnecessary. This is why they're saying that. They filed submissions to court. This was for the hearing that came up before Chief Justice Sykes on March 28. Now, they say the local government minister had actually started to engage the Electoral Advisory Commission on the Portmore issue from 2022. They said the ECJ wrote and said they're prepared to give feedback to Parliament once the boundaries for the parish of Portmore are defined and there's a need to identify how they will affect the electoral boundaries for Portmore and the surrounding parishes. I'm going to hazard a guess so that the ECJ wasn't expecting that they would be giving feedback on an act that had actually been passed by both the lower house and the upper house. Anyway, the ministry says they asked several times for a meeting with the ECJ, the Electoral Commission. They didn't get an answer. And they also said the minister had not named a date for the act to be brought into effect. And it was clear that the minister hadn't intended to make Portmore a parish until the legal issues had been dealt with. And they're saying this because they said the records show that he complied with the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee of Parliament that looked at the Portmore parish issue, and also that he had been engaging with the Electoral Commission. Let me just pause a minute here to say that in my previous video, I said I didn't think the level of consultation in the case was nearly enough. Let me just say that according to the court documents, JLP MP Robert Miller, who represents St. Catherine South East, saying he had 23 meetings with constituents on the Portmore issue. Alanda Terrelong, the JLP MP for St. Catherine East Central, also spoke about community meetings. So I'm putting that out there for the record. I still think there were consultations that needed to happen. As I said, when you look at the representations made to the Joint Select Committee of Parliament, there were hardly any community groups that responded, and I don't think enough was done. So as I said, both sides claimed victory after the March 28th hearing, right? The PNP said that the outcome was a clear vindication of the PNP's position. They said the court has affirmed what they have consistently maintained, that the government was attempting to move forward in blatant breach of the constitutional process. The court affirmed no such thing. The interim injunction wasn't necessary anymore because government had given an undertaking not to bring the act into effect. The PNP is suggesting here that the court was agreeing that the government was acting unconstitutionally. The court never said nothing like that, never made any such conclusion. Those are decisions that would come at a later date after arguments on the constitutionality of the act have been made at trial. We're not there yet. This is a preliminary stage. Now, the JLP MP Alanda Terrelong said the court ruling was a win for the people of Portmore and the government of Jamaica. He said the court action brought by the opposition was a premature and desperate political move to disrupt Portmore becoming the 15th parish. He said after hearing arguments from both the opposition and government, Chief Justice Brian Sykes ruled against the application for an injunction and accepted the government's position that the act making Portmore the 15th parish would only come into operation after completion of the procedure outlined in the Constitution. Now, this is also misleading. The judge accepted the undertaking given by the government side that they will not bring the act into effect. The JLP is suggesting here that the court has decided that the PNP was wrong to bring the case, and that's not what this is. All right, so in very simple language, let me summarize. All right, so the PNP said, hey, we're worried the government is going to go ahead with this law and make Portmore parish, even though there are constituency boundary issues where we have to deal with. Can we have an interim injunction to make sure that doesn't happen? The interim injunction was granted by the court. The government then said to the court, look, we're not going to do this. We're not going to make Portmore a parish until everything that needs to happen has happened. So you never need no more interim injunction. And the court made an order based on the government's promise. So was the PNP's action premature or unnecessary? I don't think it was. I hear from the government side there was never any intention to bring the act into effect without all the groundwork being done. And the leader of government business in the Senate, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, did say during debate on the bill that the Parliament will declare the parish and then the boundaries will be sorted using the normal mechanisms of the ECJ. I still say this doesn't make no sense. The Portmore Act should be the final step in the process. Why on earth would you pass an act making Portmore a parish when there's still so much groundwork that needs to be done? The whole heap of rhetoric we're hearing, all the wonderful things that would happen when Portmore becomes a parish, and the actions in pushing the bill through Parliament suggested that there was cause for concern. And I want to say one more time, I don't have any strong feelings, yes or no, about Portmore becoming a parish. My concern is and has always been the process, and I think there are problems with the process. The PNP is saying they didn't get an answer to their letter, raising concerns about the issue. Raise concerns. News about the Electoral Commission writing to the Parliament about the consequences of bringing the act into effect. That also raised concerns. Then there were the comments of JLP MPs that also again raised more concerns as to the political motivation behind what was happening. At the very least, there were mixed messages out there. What needed to happen if the government actually wanted to say to the country, and I said to the country, not to the opposition. The two of love go on like say on a one day in a country, PNP and JLP, and forget how many people support. No, right? The government needed to say to the country by way of a full statement from the Minister of Local Government in Parliament, giving that undertaking he gave to the court, saying that he undertakes not to bring the act into effect until the other work has been done, and also clearly outlining the process going forward. I don't think the Senate leader's comments were enough to counter the mistrust and the concerns that were already out there. And without that kind of very clear statement from the local government minister, I don't think the opposition was being either premature or dramatic or unnecessary in asking for that interim injunction. Now remember, the case itself is still to be heard. The opposition has a claim before the court challenging the Portmore Act as being unconstitutional, and we'll see what happens with that. Of course, I'll bring you the details on that as well. All right, have to leave it there.
Oh, no, go on the first promise. On the things that we are putting back in the office. On the things that we are novice. On the better listen to this. Vote them out, cause them not see we when we hungry. Vote them out from Kingston to country. Vote them out, cause when they win them a go dump way. We have to tell them promptly, people just vote them out, cause them not see we when we hungry. Vote them out from Kingston to country. Vote them out, we have to tell them promptly, cause when they win them a go dump way. Marky G, you know you the people them really want to see a great leader who will talk to we. Put on the boat and go, they go walk to we, yes, come march to we. Because we have some guy with them on a intention, leading the country in a the wrong direction. That's why we come to make we own a selection. This we are gonna do a when him call the election. Vote them out, cause them no see we when we hungry. Vote them out from Kingston to country. Vote them out, cause when them win them a go down pray. So we a tell them promptly people to vote them out, cause them no see we when we hungry. Vote them out from Kingston to country. Vote them out, cause when them win them a go down pray. We have to tell them